Hello and welcome to Ideas with Diana. Today is November 15th, 2022. It's early morning in Wisconsin. The first snow has started to fall. Actually, this is the first snow day. We're expecting lake effect about 3 inches or so. But this shows about a reflection regarding Oksana Boyko's show World Apart, which I just finished listening to a few minutes ago on Be All End All. And the concepts of understanding each other again and also talking again. Um, the reason why I put in the description with the midterm elections, with the adults coming back in the room, is because for the last 2 years, those of us who are Republican, or even basically Republicans who support a social safety net, as well as limited universal basic income due to the pandemic, with people whose livelihoods were affected. We're now sometimes it's very frustrating for us to talk with our friends on the opposite side of the aisle because we're very frustrated because when we talk, we hear, well, you don't care about abortion. You care about this and this, and apparently, just by sound bites or idea cards, they can understand how every one of us thinks. No, although I'm a Republican, I am my own individual. I have my own ideas. I don't support things hook, line, and sinker. And part of the reason I am a Republican because basically it used to be the Democrats used to be open to good ideas and you didn't have to support everything hook, line, and sinker. But the Republicans since Reagan have opened up that basically you can pick and choose what you support. And in addition, even I'm LGBT as well because I'm LGBT. And the thing is, what happens though is when I talk with Republican friends, they say, well, if you're LGBT and you're Republican, you must be a bootlicker. And I had to look up in a dictionary what that vulgar term meant, and I was like, really? That's what you think? That's how backwards your thinking is? Oh my God. So that's why I'm glad with this election that basically adults are coming back into the room, namely with the change in the Congress that is going back to a slight Republican majority, which will force people to work together, and the Senate, which will also force people to work together. Although the president says he has the veto pen, that's true. But again, he's going to have to learn. You have to work together too, because to give an example, a question that Oksana Boyko asked one guest, a former senator, retired military officer from Virginia. She asked, well, what would have happened if Trump was in office at the time this conflict occurred? Was it, and and he said, well, he felt that basically the conflict wouldn't have occurred because Trump would have been able to talk with the president of Russia and to figure out a way how to resolve this thing without having to actually go into sending troops. In essence, like President Truman used to say, some he used to joke that sometimes some politicians needed to be hit with a 2x4 before you got their attention, and the tanks were the 2x4 in this instance. And Trump would have been able to listen more so that the 2x4 wasn't needed. And that's what I like about the show today, like that, because with the discussion about this thing in the Ukraine, um, this war doesn't benefit the American people, doesn't benefit the Russian people, doesn't benefit the European people. It benefits those who are going to profit from it. Basically, like the one speaker said, what was this term he used? Globalist, and another term to form like a form of elite group of elitists who will benefit. But the thing is, we're facing an economic recession worldwide because Amazon laid off 10,000 people. Twitter laid off a lot of people. Let's see, Facebook laid off a lot of people. And tech industry is like wow, really, first big layoff ever. So, you know, when you think about with our friends in Europe having to pay high heat bills, and we're getting prepared too. Fortunately, this year we're getting an increase in Social Security for 9.4% in January, which is going to help many of us. But there are still many of us that had applied for energy assistance, and we had early season here. The thing is, with the midterm elections, finally, the reason why I say the adults are coming back into the room is because on Twitter you can speak openly if you're a Republican, not worry about getting there. So if like the old Ed Sullivan thing when the Doors saying, "Come on, baby, light my fire," and they said, "Well, you can't get you the links you can't get." And Ed Sullivan they were like, we're past that. Now at the midterms, it's the adults back in the room. This is the 1968 is over for many of them who were young in 1960, now in the 70s and 80s. This is 2022. The population of the world now this morning is 8 billion people. We don't think the same way we did in 1968, and we especially don't go with this. Someone shaking the finger and saying, you shouldn't say those naughty things. You shouldn't say those naughty thoughts. Think those naughty thoughts. Um, what does that mean for this Ukraine war thing? Well, so far, when I watch different news, especially RT, and also the news shows on RT, Modus Operandi, and the cost of everything, which I watched earlier this morning with Christy I. In addition to let's see, another show, let's see, The Insider, and that though. I mean, the thing is, what happens? It's good to see the shows coming back, and that RT has won their lawsuit about being censored because why? What's so dangerous about listening to different people talk about different ideas? When I go to a coffee shop and I go to Barnes and Noble, part of the thing I like about going to Barnes and Noble and to a coffee shop is like seeing people talk about different ideas. And when I come in to my Barnes and Noble, many people know I'm a Republican. Some people say, well, you used to be a Democrat and you converted. Well, in my early days, I was liberal, but here's the reason why I converted over. Um, this goes back to the early 80s. In 1980, I did vote for President Carter, and I still respect President Carter for the work he does and his faith. Last night I listened to Mike Pence's interview, which I'll get in later in the program. But the reason why I changed over formally to Republican by 1984 was um, my parents were still alive and they had these newscasts saying, oh, Ronald Reagan was a B actor. He only made B movies, and they weren't anything to really write home about. So my parents said, well, how about we watch one of these B movies? And we watched Newt Lockney of Notre Dame, and I didn't realize when I was watching it, actually, my parents knew one of the players of Newt Lockney's team because when they went to college at UW-Madison, he was actually coach of the Badgers when they went to the Rose Bowl in 1952. And so we watched the movie, and then my parents told me about the football coach that they knew when they went to UW-Madison, and he says, "Well, what do you think now?" And I said, "Well, I didn't. I think that movie was panned because that movie was had certain ideas that didn't agree with one political party's viewpoint, so they wanted to skew their viewpoint, and that's why in '84 I voted Republican. A second reason why I voted Republican was because during the '84 campaign, there's one commercial that showed that's supposed to show leadership, and it showed basically a lead phone ringing, and said, well, this president will make sure that this lead phone never rings and we get into a nuclear war. And my dad said, you understand what the hotline is? Yes. I said, yes, that's not a telephone. It's actually a teletype. It's actually an ASR 33 teletype connected between the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, and all and the teletypes are all set in caps so that no one may use emphasis, so that the messages are always kept basically at a low level, not like this. And that also what caused me to switch to the Republican Party. The thing is, what does it mean for me to when I say I'm a Republican? Does that mean I'm against social programs? No, I consider myself more of a social, faith-based Republican. I believe social programs are right, and social programs are right also because of faith, because we should help others, and we should share equally in what we make and in what we do as a society and as a civilization. However, do I believe in beating people's head down with a certain face, saying, if you don't believe my way, I'm going to do this or this, or making people live my faith? No, I don't. I don't believe in doing that. I mean, I was raised First Congregationist, and right now in Racine, I'm I go to I attend a Lutheran church in Racine, my neighbor Lutheran church in Racine, where a friend and I go um, each month. They have for church dinner, and sometimes we go out for coffee before the service. In addition, I still maintain ties with the UU church when I lived in Kenosha. Um, but part of the thing is about this Ukraine thing is, um, first thing, there's a concern about where it was banned in the Ukraine Constitution, I guess in 2014, that you couldn't speak Russian, everyone has to speak Ukraine. And does that mean that everyone had to be Orthodox Catholic? I mean, my grandparents were Orthodox Catholic, but they never forced anyone to be Orthodox. And also, they always did business with many people. So you didn't have to be Orthodox Catholic to do business with them. And my family always was open-minded. But we did run into some people, some groups that were very ethnocentric. I won't mention the religion, but they were very ethnocentric to the point that they actually kept their business notes in a special religious language, so that people could not understand what was really going on with their business practices, rather than in English. And also, they're ethnocentric as far as who they gave loans to. And eventually that cycle was broken in the early 2000s, but in Kenosha it lasted a very long time, and Kenosha is just starting to recover from it. The thing is, um, when you say, well, okay, everyone has to speak Ukrainian if they're a citizen of Ukraine, or someone says, well, if someone's starving and they take bread from someone offering bread or something that's not Ukrainian, and when the threat is after the war is over, they're going to be prosecuted. God, what a stupid way to think. People can't live on air. People have to have so much nourishment. It's like the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air, you die. 3 minutes without water, you die. 30 days without food, you die. And that was observed many times in history, especially during the famine of 1931, where many Ukrainians died. And the other thing is, if someone who's in an occupied area has diabetes like I do, and someone offers some insulin, of course they're going to take it, because if you don't take your insulin, you're going to get ketosis, and you'll die just as fast by ketosis. So this goes back to having the adults in the room. I'm glad the bilateral talks between the United States and Russia are starting, and to tell you the truth, I'm glad the four cone heads of Europe, who I talked about in the past, as well as other groups, are put at the children's table, because we really need to have a discussion on this, and the best way is a bilateral discussion between the U.S. and Russia, is my personal opinion. And when we think about this, I'm glad this moment finally has come, because winter's coming. And as I look out the window here, I can see like there's a dusting of snow right now. And even last night they were warning people, because many people in this area commute that living scene either commute to Chicago or commute to the suburbs of Milwaukee. And first time driving on this, it's a little slippery. The salt's not out. Even if you have four-wheel drive on your car, it's not a, you still can't drive with those commercials where they go over the snowbank and do this and this. You still have to remember, keep a safe distance. Don't slam on your brakes, and make sure you go because where I live, there's a little bit of a hill during the winter. There's so many people that think, well, I have anti-lock brakes, I can go 45 miles over this hill, and then when it comes to a stop sign, they slide all the way through it because they don't realize it takes time for the anti-lock brakes to work. And this is what I mean about considering other people's view. You got to consider the situation, you got to consider opinion. And it's like what Auxiliary Boyko said this morning on her show, World Apart, Be All, End All. And I'm glad she had a representative, a former senator who is a wise elder statesman like Mike Pence was last night on the ABC News interview. Because we really need to understand this. And also she asked him, she says, well, do you think once this is over we can begin to live with each other again? And he says, I hope so. And I think we can. What happens now that we started to discuss and we're not doing this polarization and we're not doing this religious ethnicity or language ethnicity, and people finally realizing this Russophobia is basically a false tactic from the cancel culture, like the same people who damaged two statues at the University of Wisconsin, that preached openness and education for all in 2020. We're finally realizing that this wokeism has gone too far. It's not really to help everyone. It's really to sort of have one race sort of retaliate against someone else. Even Gene Roddenberry and D.C. Fontana when they wrote the episode Farpoint. There's a point in the episode where Q asks the captain, he says, well, and he says, what court are we in? He says, well, we're in the UN Court of 2075, and I claim that based on the UN rule of 2060 that my generation cannot be held accountable for past transitions, errors, or wars of my predecessor. He says, yes, that was the rule in 2060, except we're in the post-atomic court of 2045. And he says, oh my God. And what happens, and that's what the problem with wokeism. Wokeism is like the post-atomic court of 2045 in Farpoint. They're trying to blame the current generation for everything done by past predecessors or ancestors. Sorry, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. People born living in the present, there's no way they could have time traveled back to tell their predecessors, hey, don't do this, don't do that. Even if you did, you'd cause a time loop. And what happens is people living in the present, it does not mean that basically just because their predecessors did that they are continuing it and that they should be retroactively punished. Even when there's one history program on PBS where one person looks at people's guts, now they put a little blurb in front of it, letting people know that one section of that has been edited out because there was a bias about some might have a concern that it was blaming someone for the past if their family held slaves. Whether someone's family held slaves in the past or not doesn't make them evil. It doesn't, because the person living now had no choice in the decision, and also they're moving forward in time, and so what happens? That was a different time, a different attitude, a different belief system. And this is going back to why I'm glad with the bilateral talks, because I think part of this issue came about, like the one senator from Virginia mentioned that if Trump was in office, this thing wouldn't have happened because Trump was a better listener, and he would have found a way to. He wouldn't have needed to be hit by with a 2x4 by seeing tanks come across the border. He would have realized that we need to figure out a solution so we don't get into this sticky situation and impact millions of people. So that's why I'm glad to see on RT that Oksana Boyko show Worlds Apart, Peter Lavelle's show, um, um, Crosstalk is doing well, and also the new shows, Melissa Belande, um, The Cost of Everything, and The Insider are doing good. That because basically all of them are giving opinions which I don't observe when I watch other news channels. Part of my thing is living history, and I watch different news channels, and also I read different books because you can see in the background I have this book I discussed in the last show, Russian Composers Abroad, Why They Stay, Why They Leave, Why They Head Back, and another book, System Error, where big tech went wrong and how we can reboot. Um, and this bilateral talks is addressing both parts because it's important. It's important. And this morning, when I woke up, I read a sample of Mike Pence's book on Kindle, and I liked what I read though because the section I read, Mike Pence was raised the same way I was. My parents wanted me to make sure that I paid for part of my college, and also I paid for part of my car insurance by working at the family company. So in a way, Mike Pence and I were raised the same way, and basically also we were raised in city farm country because like with my great grandmother, she still lived on a farm in Black Earth, and when my parents used to go out there, and my mother would go out there when she was young with her parents, she'd make lutefisk, homemade lutefisk, and to our audience, homemade lutefisk is a delicacy among people from Scandinavian Nordic countries. So basically, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, um, Iceland. That's a delicacy. So, and also being raised partially in a farm country, I mean, we used to breakfast of three stacked pancakes, eggs, milk, and partially being German, it's also with scrambled eggs with pepper, like that though, which I like scrambled eggs with pepper, along with three stacked pancakes. So, you know, this is a case of understanding the culture. But now, when a friend of mine asked me what I thought about the Mike Pence interview this morning, I said Mike Pence is a great elder statesman. He held his composure and demeanor, even though I thought the questions were rather slanted towards the Democratic side. And if he should decide to run for president, I would vote for him. And my friend said, "Well, what do you mean your questions were slanted?" I said, "Well, actually, it was there weren't questions asked that Republicans would want to ask." And he said, "Well, what's like one question?" Well, Republicans would ask questions regarding addressed to all of the American people, not just to one political party. They say, well, based on what you feel about what happened in the aftermath of the 2020 election, and how would you discuss what we need to go forward to those who live where you live in Indiana, and those of us who live in farm city areas in Wisconsin, compared to those elites who live in New York, Los Angeles. How would you describe something that's a unifying narrative to both groups? Because many of us still feel the elites in New York and Los Angeles still lost touch. Even when I listen to Megyn Kelly's show, I can sense the same thing. The thing I like about Mike Pence's book, though, is that basically he gave some of his family values and some of his faith, and and like I said, it's very similar to how I was raised. My father was a deacon of the church. My mother taught Sunday school and was president of a church. also what happens was when we lived, we didn't force anyone to live according to our faith or how we did it. As Americans, you have a right to live how you wish, whether you wish to believe in faith or not. You're supposed to be treated equally, and also there isn't supposed to be any religious ethnocentricity or ethnocentricity of any kind. And when I listen to Mike Pence, I know he understands it from the interview and from the beginning sections of reading his book this morning. But it's interesting. It took 2 years for basically Republicans to be able to speak freely on social media without being banned for life, without having a little comment underneath and saying, well, this represents a Republican Party or something, or this. Um, internet was supposed to be a forum that was supposed to be independent of political, religious, and cultural ethnocentricity. And again, I'm going to use it again, ethnocentricity. And also it's supposed to be independent of hegemony. I'm sorry, I have a little trouble speaking certain pronouns, certain consonants. So the reason why internet was developed that way is because in the 60s, especially in the U.S., there were many things that were filtered. Our music was filtered, especially if you lived in Milwaukee, our music was filtered. You could listen to some things on WOKY late at night when they could sort of sneak them in. But many people in Milwaukee, what they eventually did was they eventually put up very high antennas so we could pick up WLS in Chicago for rock radio and WGN. And even a friend of mine who lives in Racine, in his apartment, he has a special antenna set up where he can watch WGN News. And I still miss being able to watch WGN because it's nice to hear a conservative, moderate perspective, not something that's so far left or something that's so far right in crazy land. It's nice to hear a Republican-based perspective that is open-minded to everyone, but not in the crazy zone like that. And some people in Milwaukee would say, well, you're listening to the Colonel station, referring to the late Colonel McCormick. Even when I read the Chicago Tribune, they say, well, you're reading their Colonel's paper. Yeah, well, they got a better business section than the Milwaukee Journal did back then. And also the business section was a separate section. It wasn't part of the sports page, which means they were committed to business. And so I'd read the business section first and the national news second. Then I'd read Temple. And finally I'd read the sports last. When I was in junior high school, I used to read the sports first because basically I was very much a sports fan, interested in baseball, football, watched the Cubs on Channel 9 when Jack Brickhouse was broadcasting, and still remember how to sing the seventh inning stretch. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. And in Chicago, in Milwaukee, that's still part of the culture. Now, what happens when the Cubs and the Brewers play in other cities? Other people don't put it in the Bible saying, well, you can't sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" like the way the Ukraine government banned Russia from the Constitution. God, when I think about was someone plastered or drank too much when they thought of doing that? That's the worst thing you can ever do. Because if someone does that, of course they'll definitely cause a civil war and they'll cause a riot. Many people speak many languages. When my grandparents were alive, we in addition to English, we spoke French. We spoke French and German in the home. Also in Polish. And even like when I knew one close friend in Rotterdam, I taught myself how to speak Dutch so that basically we could share ideas more with each other and share feelings. And that I still think of her, and I'm glad basically she's made a good life for herself and her daughter. But the thing is, um, to say that anyway, God, uh, what stupidity. Because even in computer programming, when I started in pre-med as well as EECS, in those days the four basic computer programming languages were Fortran, COBOL, PL1, and assembler. Not just one, four, four. Nowadays, basically, it's about 250. And for example, languages I use nowadays are Delphi, Java, C++ when I do my Arduino hardware projects, C Sharp when I do my Windows projects. So when some group of elitists says we want everyone to speak all one language, I would invite them to read the Star Diaries by Stanislav Lem about the one story where everyone had to act like fish or amphibians to satisfy some sort of central directorate because they thought that living as amphibians people would live better, live longer. I suggest you read that story from the Star Diaries with a new sense of conviction. Um, so in conclusion, I'm glad RT is able to get new shows going because they are getting out viewpoints that aren't mentioned in the news. And even before this conflict started with COVID, e- um, I I started to watch to have certain days I don't watch the news because I'm concerned about being preached to by a script or being preached to by managed news or fake news. And the reason why is because it's like um, you know I wish they'd go back to the original reporting that Walter Cronkite, David Brinkley, David Huntley, um, Edward R. Murrow um, used to do, basically where there actually was news and analysis, and it wasn't the rip and read of a political party's spiel or administration spiel. Because even during the first Gulf War, when we worked during the first Gulf War, I remember there's a close friend of mine. She was a nurse during the Vietnam Gulf of Tonkin era, and she warned me. She said, "Please, the way you're going to survive through this is please don't listen to the 5 o'clock news too much because it will become the 5 o'clock follies, and you will get frustrated sooner than what you think." And she was right. So what happens? Many of us we bought albums and tapes. I remember buying Belinda Carlisle's album "Wild Horses" on audio tape because I had an audio tape player in my car and I had a audio tape player in my lab and other CDs, and that really helped us through it by not watching the news too much. And that's why even like when I started to hear too much negativity of Trump or even people mocking Trump's voice, which is what I mentioned in another show, that those of us who have trouble saying the R sound in certain continents are deeply offended because this one comedian did that. Um, I hope that he understands that it's not fun to make about how people speak and difficulties in pronouncing their sounds or something else. Although I can mimic different accents instead of the United States, I don't, because that's improper to mock someone by the accent or by a physical ailment that makes them that they have trouble saying the R sound or other types of consonants. Maybe this comedian will learn in New York. I hope so before things get any tenser. But what we need to do is basically demonstrate what Mike Pence did in the interview today and what Oksana Boyko and the guest demonstrated in the show Be All End All, that we really need to move on and forward from this. And also, the Republican group that really has issues about this war, um, I think they should step up because we do need to realize, well, where are these why are these so-called the so-called aid of sending Ukraine? Why is so much of it ending on the black market? Why are we hearing stories about not following the Geneva War Convention? Why are we hearing false reports in order to prop up the managed and fake news media sort of propaganda support while banning other legitimate news sources? So I'm glad to see more news sources that were banned are now coming back, so people can have a chance to watch it, and they can watch it on the internet, or they can watch it on the apps on the TV. I have two TVs. One TV I can watch RTA directly on my TV. The other one I have to use my computer. I'm not going to mention TV I watch it from because I'm still concerned that the cancel culture is still going to try to cancel anything that's not their narrow-minded viewpoints. So, in closing, please don't let anyone blind you, put blinders on you, muzzle you, block what you're hearing, or even make you afraid to pick up a book. Um, a free society is based upon that we can all discuss ideas, we can discuss them peacefully, even if the ideas are objectionable to us. And to all of us praying for peace, and to our friends surviving the effects of this horrible mess that was created, be strong, be strong, be strong. A solution is coming, and a better future will come out of this for everyone. But we got to have the adults in the room, and we got to follow like what Alexander Boyko's show talked about today, and what the newer shows with Peter Lavelle's show, and what I just mentioned about understanding each other and realizing that each of us has families, we have children, and the world's at 8 billion. We can't afford to be tribal. We can't afford to be religious, ethnocentric, and we can't afford to force everyone to live one certain type of religious just because someone